Madam President, I suggest the absence of quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Cook.
Senator from Vermont.
I ask consent to call the quorum be dispensed with.
Without objection, morning business is closed. Under the previous order, the Senate will resume consideration of S-23, which the clerk will report.
Calendar number 6, S-23, a bill to amend Title 35, United States Code, to provide for patent reform.
Madam President, before we begin, I have 9 unanimous consent requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate. They have the approval of the majority and minority leaders, and I ask unanimous consent these requests be agreed to.
Without objection.
And request printed in the record.
And order.
Madam President, yesterday the Senate began debate on the America Invents Act. We adopted the committee amendments, and we proceeded to have 5 additional amendments offered to the bill. This morning I'll be offering a manager's amendment along with the distinguished senator from Iowa, Senator Grassley, that incorporates additional improvements being made at the suggestions of Senator Coburn, Senator Schumer, Senator Coons, Senator Bennett, and others. When we adopt this manager's amendment, I believe we will move very close to a consensus bill the Senate can and should pass to help create good jobs, encourage innovation, and strengthen our recovering economy. And I ask consent to include in the record the statement of administration policy from the Obama administration. And I thank all those from the administration who worked on the matter, and in particular Secretary Locke, Director Kapos of the Patent Trademark Office, and former Secretary Daley, now Chief of Staff at the White House. The statement describes the bill as representing a fair, balanced, and necessary effort to improve patent quality. And it concludes, Senate passage of this bill is consistent with the administration's commitment to support and encourage innovation that leads to improved competitiveness, economic prosperity, and job growth without adding a penny to the deficit. It also notes that the transition to a first-to-file system simplifies the process of acquiring rights and describes it as an essential provision to reduce legal costs, improve fairness, and support U.S. innovators seeking to market their products and services in a global marketplace. I agree. I believe it should help small and independent inventors. On President's Day, just over a week ago, the New York Times included an article on its front page entitled, U.S. Sets 21st Century Goal, Building a Better Patent Office. Now, that's what we're trying to do with our bill, the bipartisan Leahy-Hatch-Grassley Patent Reform Act, or as it's become known, the America Invents Act. We have to reform our patent office and our patent laws. They haven't been updated for 60 years. We have to help create good jobs, encourage innovation, and strengthen our economy. In fact, in that article, the reporter notes the growth of patent applications to more than 2,000 a day last year. That's not a typographical error. 2,000 a day last year. And then a record 209,000 patents were issued in 2010. But there remains a backlog of 700,000 patents awaiting initial action at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. Another 500,000 being processed. That's 1.2 million applications in the pipeline. Now, among them could be the next medical miracle, the next energy breakthrough, the next leap in computing ability, the next killer app. So we should all be doing what we can to help PTO Director Kapos, the dedicated women and men of the PTO, to modernize and reform. It really makes no sense. It takes 2 years for an inventor to get an initial ruling on his or her patent application, then another year or more just to get the patent. The New York Times reporter Edward Wyatt notes, the delays and inefficiencies are more than a nuisance for inventors. Patent delays cost jobs, slow the economy, and threaten the ability of American companies to compete with foreign businesses. Let me emphasize that last part. threatening the ability of American companies to compete with foreign businesses. Madam President, I believe American companies can compete with any company anywhere in the world if we're given the tools to do it. And right now we're hampering American companies from competing worldwide. We're not going to be the leader we are today if we allow that to continue. But the Senate has before us bipartisan legislation that can lead to long-needed improvements in our patent laws and system. Should be focused on it and moving ahead to pass it without delay. It's a measure that can help facilitate invention, innovation, job creation, and do so in the private sector. Everyone from startups and small businesses to our largest cutting-edge companies. This is the time for the Senate not to be doing political gains, but to serve the interests of the American people by concentrating the important legislation before us. We should not be distracted. It's a bipartisan bill. We should not be diverted into extraneous issues, but focus our debate on those few amendments that senators feel need to be debated to perfect this bill and germane to this bill. I mentioned in my opening statement the anticipated amendment on fee diversion. And I appreciate the efforts of the senator from Oklahoma to end patent fee diversion. It's a reform that Senator Hatch and I have long supported. And I appreciate his working with me and withholding his amendment during committee consideration. And so we're incorporating his amendment in the manager's amendment. We also incorporated the manager's amendment, an amendment from Senator Schumer that concerns business method patents. We provide a process for their reexamination by the Patent and Trademark Office. This would also improve patent quality. We incorporate suggestions from Senator Bennett and Senator Coons to remove certain damages and venue provisions that are no longer necessary in light of recent court decisions. And the administration noted in its statement they would not object to the removal of these provisions. Senator Bennett came forward last night with sound amendments to explain they're included in this amendment, along with a change to the definition of a microentity, made at the suggestion of the majority leader, in my amendment to conform the name of the legislation to the American Invents Act. I hope we adopt this amendment without delay. Now, I understand there may be senators that do not agree with the first-to-file reform to update and simplify our system, and if they intend to bring an amendment, they should do so without delay, because I think the senator from Iowa and I would like to wrap up this legislation. Those are matters concerning this legislation we can consider, we can resolve without undue delay. We should be able to complete action on this bill today or tomorrow. Then the Senate can turn its full attention to another important matter, the funding resolution needed to be enacted this week by Congress. But what we should not do is delay or sacrifice the job-creating potential of this bill to a side debate about such things as a debt limit or whether we amend the Constitution of the United States. Those are debates I'd be happy to have in their own right. But let's not allow other countries around the world to have such a competitive advantage because we're too slow in moving on this bill. The bipartisan American Invents Act is too important to be turned into a mere vehicle to launch speeches and debates about pet causes. It's not the bill to have debates about whether if the U.S. were to reach its debt ceiling, the government should favor paying creditors like China before meeting its other obligations to the American people. That theoretical debate has nothing to do with the patent reform in this bill. There will be a bill that you can have the debate on if you want. In fact, this bill is one that doesn't spend taxpayers' money or raise a debt $1. So I would hope that we can have the support of our lead Republican sponsors and the bipartisan Senate leadership to table extraneous amendments so we can complete our work on this amendment. And I have, Madam President, I have a manager's amendment. I described private already. I will send it to the desk and ask consent that pending amendment be set aside and this be considered.
Is there objection? Without objection, so ordered. The clerk will report.
The senator from Vermont, Mr. Leahy, for himself and others, proposes an amendment numbered 121.
I ask consent to dispense with the reading.
Without objection.
And I ask for the agreement of the manager's amendment. No. Then, Madam President, I'll put in a, sorry, I thought that had been, Madam President, I suggest the absence of quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
President,
Mr. Okaka.
The senator from South Carolina.
I ask quorum call be suspended.
Without objection.
On the right to object, I will, could we, I'd ask the distinguished senator if could hold off on.
The senator cannot.
Then I suggest the absence of quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
Senator from Vermont.
I ask consent to the call of the quorum be dispensed with.
Is there objection? Without objection, so ordered.
And Madam President, I understand Senator Mint will be offering an amendment in the first degree which will require setting aside the manager's amendment, and it's my understanding once he's done that, we'll then set aside his amendment and go back to the manager's amendment.
Senator.
I yield.
Mr. President,
Senator from South Carolina.
I call for regular order and ask to call up amendment number 113 as modified.
Ask that the pending amendments be set aside.
Oh, I ask that the pending amendments be set aside and call up 113 as modified.
Is there objection? Without objection, so ordered. Clerk will report.
The Senator from South Carolina, Mr. DeMint, for Mr. Vitter, proposes an amendment numbered 113 as
President,
modified.
I ask to dispense with the reading of the amendment,
Without objection.
and I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Vermont.
Mr. President, I'd ask consent that the pending amendment now be set aside and that the manager's amendment be the pending amendment.
Without objection.
And, Mr. President, I suggest the absence of quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
So we're waiting for senators to come back to the floor here. As you've seen, they got started working on this patent overhaul bill, although not a lot of debate yet this morning. We expect the Senate to recess within the hour for the party caucus lunch, and when that happens, we hope to have live coverage for you of today's White House briefing.
Mr. President.
Senator from Delaware.
I ask unanimous consent that the form called be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I rise today to speak to the America Invents Act. To put it simply, this bill, the America Invents Act, is about creating jobs. It's about protecting and promoting American ingenuity and giving American ideas the opportunity to become American products. The America Invents Act is about restoring American competitiveness and leadership in our global economy. America has been at the forefront of global innovation throughout our nation's great history. We invented the lightning rod, the cotton gin, the mechanical reaper and thresher. Thomas Edison, perhaps the most noted American inventor, invented the electric light, electric power transmission, the motion picture camera, the phonograph, and X-ray photography. The transistor, carbon fiber, GPS, Kevlar, recombinant DNA, the personal computer, and Internet are all American inventions as well. Even more recently, American companies have invented the iPod and the iPhone and the Segway. Inventors in Delaware and across America are right now working on critical advances in wind turbines, fuel cell technology, and electric vehicles. These technical innovations and so many others have improved our standard of living, spurred job growth, and given rise to entire industries that would not have been possible without the advancements of applied science. Innovation will be, I believe, the key to reigniting the American manufacturing sector as well. As low-skilled jobs have increasingly moved offshore, the only solution is to create highly skilled jobs here to replace them, and these jobs will be founded on American ideas, inventions, and advancements. In today's high-tech world, however, the cost of innovation can be high. In my home state of Delaware, DuPont alone invests about $1.3 billion annually in research and development. Nationwide, according to the OECD, U.S. companies invest over $370 billion in research and development each year. In the pharmaceutical industry, which is also important to my home state, experts estimate each new drug requires an initial investment of between $800 million and $2 billion in critical basic research. Innovation, then, is absolutely essential to the continued growth and competitiveness of our nation. Our founding fathers recognized that investment in innovation will not occur without a system of patent rights to allow inventors to reap the fruits of their labor, and they placed with the Congress the authority to provide for the issuance of these patent rights. In our Constitution, in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 8, it states that Congress shall have the power to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. However complicated applied sciences might have been back in 1836, when Congress first established the forerunner to the Patent and Trademark Office, they are infinitely more complicated today. Never has the PTO been more central to ensuring that the system of nationwide patents contemplated by our founding fathers is possible than today. Our PTO must have clear, objective guidelines that enable an applicant to predict whether his or her application for a patent will be approved. That application process must move expeditiously. And at the end of that process, when PTO issues a patent, the inventor and industry must have confidence that the patent is of good quality and will provide good defense against future challenges. In recent years, however, the Patent and Trademark Office has fallen short of these critical objectives. Today, a patent applicant must wait over 2 years before an examiner first even picks up the application. 2 years. At this very moment, more than 700,000 applications simply sit at the Patent and Trademark Office awaiting future consideration. Each one of those applications represents an idea that could create a job, or 10 jobs, or 1,000 jobs. If you file a patent application at PTO today, you can expect to wait just over 3.5 years for an initial disposition. And should the PTO make an error in their examination, it would take 3 years more to appeal it. In a world in which startup companies depend on patents to secure critical venture capital and other funding, these wait times are just too long. And while the PTO Director, Kapos, has achieved some critical success and has begun to right the ship at the Patent and Trademark Office, he simply can't accomplish acceptable and sustainable reforms without our action here in the Senate. The America Invents Act takes a number of critical steps to improve the efficiency with which this country handles patents, all of them designed to make the U.S. more competitive in the global economy. Mr. President, first, the America Invents Act will give the PTO the tools it needs to address the unacceptably long backlog of patent applications. In February 2009, despite an increasing need for qualified patent examiners, PTO had to institute a hiring freeze. PTO is a user fee-supported organization, and I believe it should be able to pass through the cost of staffing needs to patent applicants to ensure these wait times don't continue to grow. This bill would finally give to the PTO the authority to set its own fees, rather than having to wait for an act of Congress to do so. Another source of the backlog is the issue of patent fee diversion, one with which I've long been familiar. Currently, the fees paid by patent applicants for the purpose of funding the cost of examination can be diverted away from the PTO to the Treasury without justification by Congress. Patent fee diversion cripples the ability of the Patent and Trademark Office to do its job and is essentially an unwarranted tax on innovation. In the past 20 years, more than $800 million have been diverted from the Patent and Trademark Office. And though in recent years almost no money has been diverted thanks to the determined leadership of my colleague, Senator Mikulski, the PTO funding should never depend on shifting political fortunes. Even in times of political favor, the mere possibility of fee diversion is harmful to PTO because it robs the ability of the Patent and Trademark Office to plan with confidence that a varying workload will be matched by future funding. This bill does not currently address the issue of patent fee diversion, but that is something I and others are working to change. Ending fee diversion is perhaps the single most effective thing we can do to empower the Patent and Trademark Office to reduce the patent backlog over the long term. That's why I look forward to supporting Dr. Coburn's amendment, which would ensure the PTO has access to the fees that it charges, subject to continuing congressional oversight, of course. The second thing that the America Invents Act does to make the United States more competitive is to improve the predictability and accuracy of the patent examination process. By transitioning to a first-to-file system, this bill will bring the United States patent system into line with the rest of the world. Under this first-to-file system, PTO's task of determining the priority of a patent application will be much more straightforward, because patent priority will depend on objective public facts rather than secret individual files. And to those smaller inventors who are concerned that the move to a first-to-file system will allow larger companies to beat them out in a race to the Patent Office, this bill contains important protections for all inventors, large or small. Even under the first-to-file system contemplated in this Act, an inventor's patent priority is protected for a year if he or she is the first to publicly disclose that invention. Not only does the America Invents Act make the patent process fair to inventors, but it will actually improve the quality of patents issued by the PTO by leveraging the knowledge of outside parties. This bill permits third parties to provide submissions regarding prior art before a patent is issued, enhancing the ability of examiners to determine whether an application is truly an innovative idea worthy of the protection of a patent. The bill takes another step forward towards improving patent quality by changing the way issuance of patents can be challenged. The America Invents Act introduces a 9-month post-grant review process, during which third parties can challenge a patent on any grounds. When you combine the new pre-issuance submission process and the new post-grant review process, what I believe we'll get is a more rigorous, more thorough vetting of patent applications. And I believe as a result we will get stronger, higher quality patents because of this America Invents Act. Chairman Leahy, along with his Republican co-sponsors, Senators Hatch, Kyle, and Sessions, I believe deserve enormous credit for the bill that was reported unanimously by we on the Judiciary Committee just 4 weeks ago. The America Invents Act reflects years of hard-fought negotiations between the affected stakeholders. And at a time, frankly, when bipartisanship here in the Senate is too frequently a platitude rather than actual progress, it should be noted that the America Invents Act shares wide bipartisan support. Senators from both parties have worked together on the bill that we consider today, and both sides of the aisle should be proud of what is being accomplished. I also want to applaud leaders Reid and McConnell for their commitment to an open amendment process. Despite the broad agreements that have been reached so far, the Senate can and should consider germane suggestions to change and improve this bill. I know that I will support Dr. Coburn's amendment on fee diversion. I also hope the Senate will accept an amendment that I have filed today, which would remove the section of the bill dealing with venue. While venue shopping is indeed a serious problem, the current language in the bill risks stunting the further development of case law, which has begun to address the problem of plaintiffs manufacturing venue in districts that have a reputation of being hospitable for patent suits. In fact, companies such as Oracle and HP, which initially supported the legislative version here, the reform of venue in this bill, now fear this provision will do more harm than good. I look forward to debating this and many other in the amendments to be considered by the Senate in the future. Mr. President, let me conclude my remarks on Senate Bill 23, the America Invents Act, by renewing my call to my fellow senators to carefully consider and support this critical legislation. The America Invents Act is complicated, and the subject matter may seem daunting, but I believe it is critical to protecting American innovation and defending and advancing American competitiveness. The playing field for economic innovation has never been more crowded. The United States faces rivals growing in strength and number, which is why our government should be encouraging innovation rather than stifling it. The America Invents Act will create jobs in Delaware and throughout the United States by removing some of the current administrative roadblocks that prevent inventors from becoming successful entrepreneurs. This bill, I believe, will improve the speed, quality, and reliability of our Patent and Trademark Office, and it will ensure that America retains its place in the world as the leader of invention and innovative thinking. Mr. President, I yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
And again, we're waiting for senators to come back. They've been working this morning a bit on this patent overhaul bill. We expect more on that later this afternoon after they break for their party lunches, their caucus lunches. Should be in about a half hour or so. When they do that, we're going to try and bring you live coverage of today's White House briefing. Also, we remind you in just a moment or so on C-SPAN, the House in today to take up a stopgap spending bill that could cut some $4 billion from fiscal 2011 appropriations. That measure would avoid a government shutdown this Friday when the current stopgap spending law expires and allow lawmakers more time to work on a longer-term appropriations bill. So that's C-SPAN in just a moment when the House is in. The Senate here this afternoon again on C-SPAN 2. And a couple of minutes after 12 o'clock here in the East, quick reminder, the Senate should be recessing in about a half hour for their party caucus lunches. When they do that, we're told now about 12:45 Eastern this afternoon, we'll hear from the White House spokesman Jay Carney, and we hope to have that live for you. Just underway on C-SPAN, I can see right now on the floor of the U.S. House, Speaker Boehner, as a debate gets underway, discussion at least gets underway on that stopgap spending bill that would cut some $4 billion from the fiscal 2011 appropriations. Also, that idea there to avoid a government shutdown this Friday. We have coverage on C-SPAN, the Senate here on C-SPAN 2. Chairman Ben Bernanke in front of the Senate Banking Committee right now on C-SPAN 3, the Federal Reserve Chairman, and all of this for you all the time at our website, cspan.org.